The eternal Sentinel glided through the void of space like a predator on the hunt, its sleek frame cutting a stark silhouette against the backdrop of distant stars. Captain Ilara Voss stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic display that dominated the room. The distress signal pulsed across the screen, a desperate cry for help from Outpost Theta 9, a remote trading station situated on the fringes of known space. Status report, Ilara commanded, her voice calm but firm. Commander Idris Nail, her second-in-command, stepped forward. Distress signal came in 20 minutes ago. Automated broadcast, no response to hails. Scans show no signs of life, but there's residual energy, likely weapons fire. Whatever happened, it wasn't natural. Ilara's brow furrowed. Theta 9 was insignificant, a speck in the grand scheme of the galaxy. Yet it was strategically positioned near key trade routes that connected multiple alien territories. An attack here was no accident. Take us in. Shields up and prepare a tactical sweep, she ordered. The Sentinel drifted closer, its powerful sensors probing the wreckage that once housed thousands of traders, miners, and civilians. The image that appeared on the holographic display was grim. Scorched hulls, floating debris, and the skeletal remains of the station, drifting aimlessly in the vacuum. Analysis, Ilara asked, her tone clipped. Lieutenant Cade Varon, the ship's tactical officer, worked furiously at his console. Weapons signatures don't match any known faction. There's evidence of cloaked ships, traces of energy signatures that don't align with standard stealth tech. Whoever did this, they were precise. The station was disabled before anyone could escape. A chill ran through the bridge. This wasn't the work of pirates or raiders. It was methodical, calculated. Captain, Idris interjected, his voice low. We're picking up a recording from the station's logs. Audio and visual feed intact, though corrupted. Play it, Ilara ordered. The display flickered to life, showing the chaos within Theta 9 moments before its destruction. Civilians ran in panic as alarms blared. A shadow passed over the station. A massive ship cloaked in shimmering black, its outline barely visible against the void. Energy blasts tore through the station's defenses with ruthless efficiency. The last frame froze on a haunting image. The symbol of an unrecognizable faction burned into the side of the attacking ship. What in the stars is that? Cade muttered. Ilara didn't answer immediately. The insignia, a jagged spiral encircling an unblinking eye, was unfamiliar, but the precision of the attack spoke volumes. Commander, she said, her voice sharp, transmit this to the Galactic Council immediately. They need to see this. As Idris moved to comply, Ilara stared at the frozen image on the screen. Her instincts screamed that this was only the beginning, a spark meant to ignite something far greater. Helm, set a course for the nearest trade route, she ordered. If this was an isolated attack, I'll eat my uniform. We need to find out who's behind this before it's too late. The Eternal Sentinel turned, engines roaring to life as it plunged into the unknown. For Ilara, the path ahead was clear. Someone had betrayed the fragile peace humanity had fought so hard to build, and she would stop at nothing to uncover the truth. The vastness of space stretched before the Eternal Sentinel as it surged toward the Maelstrom Nebula, a region once avoided due to its violent electromagnetic storms. The nebula, a swirling mass of gas and energy, was an ancient barrier between galactic territories, a place where signals went silent and ships disappeared without a trace. But it was the last known location of the mysterious cloaked ships that had attacked Theta 9. Ilara stood at the bridge's helm, her eyes narrowing as the nebula loomed ahead. The crew could feel the tension in the air. Something was wrong. Helm, initiate ion shield calibration, Ilara ordered. We need to push through the interference. Commander Idris Nail, standing beside her, glanced at the readings. We're going to be flying blind for a while. The storm's intensity is growing. It'll make navigating almost impossible. We have no choice, Ilara replied. If they're hiding in there, we'll find them. Full speed ahead. The ship rumbled as its engines flared to life, the glow of its shields flaring against the incoming onslaught of charged particles. The nebulous storm was relentless, battering the Sentinel from all sides with waves of radiation and static. Communications flickered, and their sensors became a jumbled mess of false readings and distorted echoes. Yet through the chaos, Ilara's resolve never wavered. Hours passed, each minute stretching longer than the last, the storm feeling like an insurmountable barrier. The crew worked tirelessly, attempting to decode patterns in the electromagnetic chaos. The silence that filled the bridge was only broken by the steady hum of the ship's systems, a reminder that time was running out. Then, without warning, the sensors blared an alert. "Captain, we're picking up something. Faint but real," Cade Varen said, his fingers flying over the controls. "An energy signature. Low frequency. Cloaked ship." Ilara's heart quickened. Lock onto it. Full scan. For a moment, there was only static. Then, the image cleared, revealing the jagged, half-formed outline of a ship, a colossal structure barely visible against the storm. "It's enormous," Idris muttered, his voice tinged with awe. "It's a fortress," Ilara stated grimly, "and it's armed to the teeth." The ship, cloaked and camouflaged against the nebula's violent backdrop, was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Its weapon systems were dormant for the moment, but the massive hull bristled with energy-absorbing technology, as if it could consume anything that came too close. A black, jagged silhouette that seemed to bleed into the darkness of the storm. "This is where it's happening," Ilara said, her voice low but filled with a quiet fury. "They've been hiding here, gathering power. It's not just a rogue faction, it's an insurgency, and this base is the heart of it." "Should we engage?" Cade asked, his fingers hovering over his weapon systems. Ilara took a deep breath. "Not yet. We need more information before we act. We'll send a reconnaissance team in. If this is a base, it will have entrances, hidden ones." The crew, understanding the gravity of the mission, scrambled to prepare. Ilara turned to Idris. "I'm going with them. I'll need you to keep the ship in orbit and prepare for extraction." Idris hesitated, his concern visible. "It's dangerous. You don't know what you'll find in there." "I know," Ilara said firmly. "But if we wait, it could be too late. We need to find out exactly who's behind this before the galaxy goes to war." The preparations were swift. A small team of elite soldiers, equipped with cloaking devices and high-tech sensors, was ready to board a shuttle and approach the fortress undetected. Ilara, leading the team, knew the risks. Every instinct told her that this mission could change the course of history, and that she might not make it back alive. But there was no other choice. As the shuttle's doors sealed, Ilara glanced one last time at the eternal Sentinel, its silhouette almost lost in the swirling chaos of the nebula. It was more than just a ship to her. It was a symbol of everything humanity had fought to protect, and she would defend it at all costs. The shuttle lurched forward, cutting through the storm toward the unknown fortress, as the storm of war began to gather once more. The shuttle silently cut through the dense nebula, cloaked in the shadows of the maelstrom. Ilara sat in the command seat, eyes fixed on the looming silhouette of the fortress ahead. The crew aboard was tense, their minds focused on the dangerous mission at hand. They knew that every decision, every move, could determine whether the fragile piece of the galaxy would survive or shatter beyond repair. "Captain, we're approaching the outer defenses," Lieutenant Cade Varen reported, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We've located several docking bays, but they're heavily shielded. The fortress's cloak is still active, but it's not perfect. I'm starting to see weak points." Ilara nodded. "We take those weak points. No detours, no distractions. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to learn what we're facing." As the shuttle neared one of the fortress's outer docking bays, a wave of unease washed over Ilara. The entire mission felt like walking a razor's edge. If they were discovered, their chances of survival would be slim. But there was no going back now. She keyed in the final command to land, and the shuttle descended into the belly of the fortress. The bay was eerily quiet as they touched down, the air thick with the scent of rust, and something colder, unnatural. Ilara and her team disembarked, moving swiftly through the dimly lit corridors. The hum of distant machinery echoed off the walls, and the faint sound of metal scraping against metal seemed to reverberate throughout the cavernous space. They came to an access panel, and Lieutenant Mira Zane, one of the team's tech specialists, hacked into it with practiced precision. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a narrow passage that led further into the heart of the fortress. The team moved forward, weapons drawn, every step a potential trap. They came upon a control room, dark, abandoned, with only the faintest glow of monitors showing strange data. A flicker of movement caught Ilara's eye. She raised her hand, signaling for the team to freeze. A shadow slid across the wall, but there was no sound of footsteps. She narrowed her eyes. "There's something here," Ilara murmured. Mira tapped a few commands into her handheld device, pulling up a map of the fortress's interior. "There's a central core about a mile further in. It looks like a communication hub, or a command center. That's where we'll find the answers we need." But as they moved deeper into the fortress, the atmosphere grew more oppressive. The quiet was suffocating. They passed corridors lined with strange, organic-looking tech, alien artifacts that didn't belong to any known species. Ilara's mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. The markings on the walls, the strange architecture. It was all too deliberate, too ancient. Whoever was behind this insurgency wasn't just fighting for power, they were preparing something far more dangerous. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. Ilara's team immediately dropped to the floor, blending into the shadows. They watched as a group of armored figures passed by, their weapons at the ready. They were unlike any soldiers Ilara had ever seen, sleek, efficient, and completely unrecognizable. The insignia on their armor bore the same jagged spiral symbol that had been visible on the attacking ships. "Who are they?" Mira whispered, her voice barely audible. "Enemies of peace," Ilara muttered under her breath. She had known it would come to this. They weren't just dealing with rogue factions. They were dealing with a shadow faction, a force hidden in plain sight. The team continued their advance, but now there was a sense of urgency. They had to reach the core and retrieve as much data as possible before they were discovered. The silence had already been broken, and the danger was closing in. Back aboard the Eternal Sentinel, Commander Idris Nail monitored the shuttle's progress with increasing concern. The longer Ilara was gone, the more worried he became. The instability of the galaxy's peace was no longer a distant worry. It was a very real threat. He had tried to warn the Galactic Council about the growing dangers, but their dismissive attitude only fueled the suspicion that someone inside the Council was complicit in this growing insurgency. Idris sat at the command console, his fingers tapping nervously as he drafted a message to the Council. A warning. But would they listen? And if they did, would it be too late? The deeper Ilara's team ventured into the fortress, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. They moved through hallways adorned with strange symbols, their origin unknown, carved into the walls with an alien precision. The air was thick with a strange energy that hummed through their bodies, heightening their senses while simultaneously making their movements more deliberate and tense. Every corner could conceal a trap, every shadow potentially an enemy. The silence of the place seemed almost unnatural, as if the fortress itself were holding its breath, waiting for them to make a mistake. "Captain," Lieutenant Zane whispered, her eyes scanning the walls. "These markings, they're not just for show. They're patterns. A language, maybe. I could try translating them, but—" "Not now," Ilara interrupted, her voice low but firm. "We don't have time for translations. We need to find that command center. Let's move." The map Mira had hacked earlier led them through a labyrinth of winding corridors and sealed doors, until they finally reached a set of massive reinforced gates. A faint hum of power pulsed from beyond them. The entrance was protected by a sophisticated biometric lock, alien in design, but nothing their tech couldn't bypass. With swift precision, Mira bypassed the lock, and the gates groaned open, revealing a massive chamber. In the center, an imposing structure stood tall, a towering machine, covered in shifting plates of dark metal, with an intricate web of energy conduits running through it. It hummed with the power of an ancient and forgotten technology. "This is it," Ilara muttered, as she took in the sight of the massive core. "This is what they're hiding. The heart of the operation." The walls of the chamber were lined with rows of computers and communication systems, some familiar, others utterly foreign. At the center of it all was a massive control console, where a single figure stood, hunched over the terminal. He didn't seem to notice the intruders at first, absorbed in the data flowing across the screen. "Who's that?" Mira asked, her voice tight with suspicion. Ilara studied the figure carefully. He was humanoid but unnervingly still, his skin an almost translucent shade of pale blue. His hair, if it could be called that, was a strange, glowing bioluminescent mass that seemed to ripple with every movement. As he turned to face them, Ilara's eyes widened in recognition. "Commander Calix," she whispered, the name falling from her lips like a curse. He was one of the senior members of the Council's intelligence division. A traitor. Calix's eyes flickered with surprise as he saw Ilara and her team. He straightened, his expression shifting from one of focused concentration to cold calculation. "Captain Voss," he said, his voice smooth, almost too calm. "I should have expected you, but I'm afraid you're too late. The revolution has already begun." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. "What is this, Calix? What are you doing?" Calix smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You still don't see it, do you? The galaxy is a powder keg, waiting to explode. The Council's peace is an illusion, built on sand. I'm merely helping it along, breaking the chains that bind us all. The Eldrin technology is the key to freeing the galaxy from its self-imposed prison. And now, with the super weapon we've unlocked, no one can stop us. Eldrin." Ilara's mind raced as she processed the implications. The super weapon they had stumbled upon, the rogue factions. Everything was starting to make a horrific sense. Calix wasn't just a traitor. He was part of something far greater, something that threatened the very core of galactic order. "We've already made contact with several key factions," Calix continued, his voice becoming more animated. "The balance of power is shifting. We'll have allies, whether they know it or not. And when the time is right, the Council will fall. There will be no more peace, no more false alliances, only a new order, a new galaxy." Ilara's blood ran cold. Calix wasn't just a rogue agent. He was a leader of a coup, backed by the ancient Eldrin power. But something else lingered in the air, an unspoken danger, a feeling of inevitability. They weren't just here to stop a rebellion. They were facing the rise of an empire. Before she could respond, the lights in the chamber flickered and dimmed, and a low, rumbling sound echoed through the walls. Calix's smile grew wider. "You see, Captain," he said, his voice carrying a hint of madness. "The galaxy is already changing, and you're standing in the middle of it. Welcome to the future." A blinding flash of light erupted from the core, flooding the room with energy. Ilara barely had time to raise her arm to shield her eyes before everything went black. When Ilara came to, the world was a blur of light and noise. Her head throbbed, and the ringing in her ears made it difficult to focus. Slowly, she pushed herself up from the cold, metallic floor. Her vision cleared, revealing a scene of chaos. Sparks flew from broken machinery, and the once dominant hum of the fortress had been replaced by the distant thrum of failing systems. The core had unleashed an overwhelming surge of energy, a devastating shockwave that had sent everything into disarray. "Captain," Mira's voice cut through the haze. "Are you all right?" Ilara blinked, shaking her head to clear the fog. "I'm alive." "But what happened?" Mira's face was grim. "The core activated something. Some sort of self-destruct sequence. The whole facility is collapsing. We need to get out of here now." Ilara's pulse quickened as the realization hit. The insurgents had triggered a fail-safe. It wasn't just a weapon they were building. It was a bomb, a device designed to take down entire star systems. And now it was set to destroy the fortress and everything within a vast radius. "We're not leaving without answers," Ilara said, her voice firm despite the growing pressure. "We need to disable that fail-safe." Commander Calix's words echoed in her mind. "The galaxy is already changing." Ilara's hands clenched into fists. Calix had been right about one thing. This wasn't just a rebellion. It was a revolution, and they were standing in the heart of it. "I'll take point," she ordered, her eyes scanning the chamber. "Mira, Cade, get to the control panels. Shut down the self-destruct if you can." The team nodded, moving quickly. As they sprinted toward the damaged systems, the sound of rumbling grew louder. The walls seemed to tremble as if the fortress were being torn apart from the inside. Time was slipping away. Ilara didn't waste another moment. She dashed through the shifting corridors, her thoughts focused solely on one thing: getting to Calix. He was still out there somewhere, possibly behind this entire disaster. She had to stop him before the galaxy was plunged into war. As she made her way deeper into the facility, the lights flickered again, casting long, unsettling shadows across the walls. She rounded a corner and came face to face with a group of armored soldiers. The insignia on their suits confirmed her worst fear. They were the same elite operatives she had seen earlier, Calix's private army. The soldiers raised their weapons as Ilara skidded to a stop. But before they could fire, a deafening explosion shook the walls. The blast sent the soldiers flying backward, and Ilara dove for cover behind a nearby pillar. The walls groaned as if protesting the destruction that was unfolding within the very bones of the fortress. "Captain, we've located the core's main override terminal." Cade's voice crackled through the comms. "But it's heavily guarded. We need you here, now." Ilara's heart raced. There was no time to waste. She glanced at the fallen soldiers, their bodies mangled by the blast. They had been no match for the explosion, but their presence still posed a deadly threat. The sound of reinforcements approaching echoed down the hall. Ilara pressed her back against the wall, drawing her weapon. The silence was deafening. She could hear her own breathing, steady but filled with urgency. "I'm coming, Cade," she muttered as she tightened her grip on her rifle. A new wave of soldiers entered the corridor, moving swiftly and with purpose. Ilara took a deep breath, timing her next move. The first soldier rounded the corner, and before he could react, she fired, a quick, clean shot that sent him crumpling to the floor. The others hesitated, momentarily stunned, and that was enough. Ilara darted forward, her gun raised, each step filled with purpose. The soldiers quickly recovered, returning fire with precision. The corridor erupted in gunfire, each shot reverberating off the walls. Ilara moved with lethal grace, darting between pillars, using the chaos to her advantage. She made her way toward the override terminal, where Cade and Mira were already working to deactivate the fail-safe. But as she reached the control room, a voice froze her in her tracks. "Ilara, you've come so far, but it's too late." Calix's figure emerged from the shadows, his cold, calculating eyes locking onto hers. He was unarmed, but there was a confident smirk on his face, one that suggested he had already won. "Stop this, Calix," Ilara demanded, stepping forward. "You're not just betraying your people, you're setting the galaxy on a path to destruction." Calix chuckled darkly, his gaze flickering toward the glowing terminal. "Destruction? No, Captain. I'm offering salvation, a chance to break free from the corrupt peace that binds us." The lights flickered once more, and the walls seemed to groan under the pressure. The countdown to the fortress's destruction had already begun. Calix wasn't just fighting for control. He was prepared to burn everything to the ground. And Ilara knew that if she didn't act fast, his revolution would ignite a firestorm that would consume the entire galaxy. Calix's cold gaze never left Ilara as the countdown echoed in the chamber, a constant reminder of the destruction that was just moments away. The terminal behind him pulsed with a menacing glow, signaling that the self-destruct sequence was almost complete. Each passing second seemed to stretch into eternity. Ilara stood her ground, her mind racing. She had come too far, risked too much, to let Calix's madness take root in the galaxy. He was right about one thing. The peace the Council had established was fragile, built on a foundation of compromise and half-truths. But this was not the answer. The galaxy didn't need an empire born from fire. It needed unity. It needed to heal, not be torn apart. Calix, Ilara said, her voice unwavering, "You're wrong. You're not offering freedom. You're offering war. And that will only bring destruction to everyone." Calix smiled, his pale blue eyes gleaming with twisted pride. "You still don't understand, do you? This war is inevitable. The Council has weakened us all. Its endless bureaucracy has turned us into slaves to systems and treaties that only protect the few. I'm giving the galaxy a chance to break free from the chains of false peace. When this fortress burns, we will rise. The old order will crumble, and the new will take its place." "You're not freeing anyone," Ilara shot back, stepping closer. "You're enslaving everyone. You've already started a revolution in the shadows. But this will turn us into enemies forever. The galaxy will be caught in a cycle of violence, and the very people you claim to want to save will pay the price." Calix's expression hardened, his lips curling into a sneer. "They will pay the price, yes. But so will the Council. So will those who refuse to see the truth. It's not about saving people. It's about making them see that the old ways no longer work. You of all people should understand that, Ilara. You've seen the flaws. You've witnessed the corruption firsthand." Ilara's heart tightened as his words struck too close to home. She had seen it, felt it, the corruption within the very system she had once fought to protect. But even so, this wasn't the way forward. This wasn't the future they needed. A sudden noise broke the tension. Mira's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, we've almost got the fail-safe code. Just a few more seconds." "Do it, Mira," Ilara commanded. "We'll hold him off." Calix's gaze flickered toward the terminal, his smile faltering. "You think you can stop me? The data you need is already in the system. This is just a distraction. You'll never get to the heart of the power. This facility was never about defense. It was about control. And now, it's beyond your reach." With a swift motion, Calix pressed a button on his wrist, and the room trembled. A surge of energy shot through the walls, knocking Ilara off her feet. She barely managed to regain her balance, but the blast had sent the other soldiers on the opposite side of the room scrambling to cover. "Ilara," Cade shouted, but she couldn't respond. The room was spinning, and the glow of the self-destruct timer flashed more urgently. The core was nearing its final countdown, and Ilara's pulse quickened. "You're out of time," Calix said with a cruel finality, his voice echoing as if he relished the impending collapse. "The revolution is coming, Captain, whether you're ready for it or not." Ilara's breath caught. She had to stop him now. If Calix succeeded in triggering the full scale of his plan, the consequences would be catastrophic. It wasn't just the fortress that would fall. It was the galaxy itself. Ignoring the dizziness from the blast, Ilara reached for her sidearm. She steadied her breath, ignoring the aching pressure in her chest. Calix was still too confident, too sure of himself, but that arrogance would be his undoing. Without warning, Ilara fired. The shot rang out, piercing the air with a crack of sound. Calix's expression twisted in surprise as he staggered back, his hand moving to his side where blood began to pool. "You," He began, his voice sharp with shock and pain. "You underestimated me," Ilara said, her tone cold and resolute. "This isn't your revolution, Calix. Not anymore." Calix dropped to his knees, his breath shallow. His hand hovered over the terminal, but his strength was waning. "You don't understand. The galaxy, it will never be the same." Ilara took a step toward him, her eyes hardening. "The galaxy doesn't need your chaos. It needs healing." With a final, defiant look, Calix collapsed forward, his body limp against the cold floor. The terminal flickered once, then powered down, the countdown halting. "Ilara, we've got it." Mira's voice rang out, relief evident in her tone. "The self-destruct's been deactivated. You did it." Ilara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She turned toward the team, her face a mix of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. But even as the immediate threat was neutralized, Ilara knew this victory was only a temporary reprieve. Calix's revolution might be over, but the seeds of rebellion had already been sown. There were still those who believed in the collapse of the old order, and the galaxy was teetering on the edge of something far more dangerous. The war wasn't over, not yet. The silence that followed Calix's fall was deafening. Ilara stood over his body, her breath heavy, as if the weight of everything she had just experienced was finally catching up with her. Mira, Cade, and Zane moved swiftly around the chamber, securing the area, but Ilara could feel their eyes on her. The mission had been a success in one sense. They had deactivated the self-destruct, stopped Calix's plan from coming to fruition. But there was no triumph in her heart, no victory. The fortress was still collapsing around them. The rumbling of the walls, the hum of failing systems, it all seemed like a warning. As much as they had stopped one threat, there were others still lurking in the shadows, forces waiting to take advantage of the chaos Calix had unleashed. "Ilara," Cade's voice broke through her thoughts. "We need to move. Now." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "Right. Get to the extraction point. We don't have much time." Mira, Zane, and Cade didn't hesitate. They knew the urgency, the need to leave before the entire fortress came down around them. But Ilara lingered, her gaze drifting toward the terminal that had once been the center of Calix's revolution. It was still glowing faintly, as if the heart of the facility was still pulsing, alive in its death. "Ilara," Zane called, noticing her hesitation. "We've got to go." Ilara nodded, shaking off the feeling of unease that gripped her. She couldn't stay here, couldn't let the memories of Calix's twisted vision haunt her. She turned away and followed her team. But the nagging thought remained. What if Calix had been right? What if the galaxy was too far gone, too broken to be saved by anything other than a complete overhaul? But that wasn't her fight. Not now. Her fight was survival. The survival of the people who had fought to protect peace, to preserve the fragile alliances that had been built over decades. They moved through the corridors, the sound of their boots echoing in the empty halls. Every step felt heavier than the last, the reality of the situation setting in. They had won this battle, but the war? The war was far from over. When they reached the extraction point, Ilara's heart sank. The shuttle was already waiting, but the skies outside were filled with chaos. The destruction of the fortress had triggered a chain reaction. Shockwaves had rippled out through space, disrupting communications and sending fleets scattering. And amidst it all, she could see the flashing of battle. "We're too late," Cade muttered, staring at the unfolding conflict on the horizon. Ilara clenched her fists, her mind racing. Calix had set the stage for war, and now it had begun. Across the galaxy, factions and groups, some loyal to the old order, others seizing the opportunity for revolution, would be clashing. The fragile peace that had held for so long was no more. Calix had lit the fuse, and now it was up to her to stop the explosion from consuming everything. "Mira," Ilara said, her voice sharp, "get that shuttle ready for takeoff. We're going back to the fleet. We're not going to try to stop them." Zane asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "No," Ilara replied, her eyes narrowing on the horizon. "Not yet. The war's just begun. We need to regroup, get word to the council, and prepare for what's coming." Calyx was a symptom, not the cause. There are others out there, waiting for their chance. If we don't act quickly, the galaxy will burn. Mira nodded, her fingers flying over the shuttle's controls. "We're ready to go, Captain. Just give the word." Ilara's gaze lingered on the distant battle. She could feel the tension building, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She had fought for peace, for unity, but the galaxy had grown too fractured. The enemy now wasn't just Calyx. It was everyone who thought that chaos was the only path to freedom. "We fight for the future," Ilara muttered to herself, her voice barely a whisper. "And we win. For everyone." With that, the shuttle lifted off, the roar of its engines echoing through the crumbling fortress as they ascended into the uncertain future. The mission wasn't over. It had only just begun. The shuttle cut through the smoke-filled atmosphere, the stars outside twinkling like distant promises. Inside, the crew sat in silence, each of them lost in their thoughts. Ilara's gaze remained fixed on the view outside, her mind still racing. The mission, the fortress, Calyx, all of it felt like a dream, a nightmare she couldn't shake. And yet reality pressed in on her, unforgiving and constant. "Captain," Mira's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We're almost at the fleet. The council's been trying to reach us. They're asking for a status report." Ilara didn't respond immediately. The weight of what they had just accomplished, and what they had failed to prevent, still hung over her like a shadow. Calyx had been just one figure in a much larger play, and his death, while a temporary victory, hadn't stopped the growing unrest. It hadn't stopped the war. "We'll need to prepare for what comes next," Ilara said, her voice steady but tired. "Get me a secure line to the council. It's time to inform them of the reality." Mira nodded, working quickly at the communications panel. The hum of the shuttle's engines filled the brief silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of static as Mira tried to patch through to the council's command. Finally, the screen blinked to life, revealing the stern faces of council representatives. "Ilara," said the voice of Councillor Severin, his face etched with concern. "What's your status? We've been tracking the fortress, and we've received reports of massive disruptions in the sector. What happened?" Ilara took a deep breath, knowing the gravity of what she had to say. The fortress was never just a weapons facility. It was Calyx's base of operations. His plan to trigger a galaxy-wide revolution nearly succeeded. We were able to stop the self-destruct sequence, but not before the damage was done. Calyx is dead, but the insurgents he left behind are already rallying. The galaxy is on the brink of full-scale war. The councillors exchanged uneasy glances. Severin leaned forward. "How serious is the threat, Captain? What steps have you taken to contain it?" "We're on our way back to the fleet to regroup and assess the situation," Ilara replied. "But it's not just Calyx's forces we're dealing with. His actions have sparked something much larger, a wave of rebellion that's sweeping across multiple sectors. Some groups are already attacking council strongholds, while others are seizing strategic locations. The galaxy is divided." The councillors shifted, the weight of the news settling heavily on them. The fragile peace they had worked so hard to maintain was teetering on the edge of collapse. "We need a unified response," Ilara continued. "The council must act quickly before more factions join the chaos. Calyx was just one piece of the puzzle. There are others, more dangerous, more organized. They believe they can topple the old order and rebuild in their image. We can't afford to wait and hope it resolves itself." A pause hung in the air as the councillors processed her words. Severin's face hardened, and he spoke with quiet resolve. "Agreed. We'll begin mobilizing the additional forces immediately. But Ilara, you need to understand, we can't win this without you. You've proven yourself capable of leading in the most dire of circumstances. You and your team will be crucial in coordinating the defense of key systems. Ilara's pulse quickened at the weight of the responsibility, but she knew there was no turning back now. The galaxy was on the edge of a knife, and only a few could tip the balance. "We'll do whatever it takes," Ilara replied, her voice firm, despite the uncertainty that still lingered within her. "We'll coordinate with the Council, but we'll also need to keep a close eye on the insurgent leaders. We can't let the entire galaxy spiral into chaos." As the transmission ended, Ilara turned to her team, who had been listening intently. Their faces were a mixture of determination and weariness, but she could see the fire in their eyes. They were ready. "We've only just begun," Ilara said, a fierce edge in her voice. "This war is going to be long, and the price will be high. But we'll fight. We fight for the future, for the galaxy we want to rebuild." Mira, Cade, and Zane nodded, their resolve matching hers. They had seen the darkness. Now, they would stand as the light. The shuttle broke through the final layers of atmosphere and approached the fleet. Ships of all sizes glided through the stars, each one a testament to the strength of the old order, now fractured but not broken. As Ilara looked out over the fleet, she felt a surge of determination rise within her. The galaxy may be on the brink of war, but there were still those willing to fight for peace. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Ilara truly believed that there was hope for the future. It would take time, sacrifice, and unity, but they would rebuild. The war had begun, but it was far from the end. It was only the beginning of a new chapter in the galaxy's story. And Ilara, the eternal Sentinel, would be there to see it through.